This very special Parsha podcast is dedicated in honor of a new baby, Mason Robert Seidman, the first grandchild of my dear friend and committed, dedicated Parsha podcast listener and dedicated listener of all the podcasts, and all around a wonderful guy and an inspiration. My dear friend Bruce Licht is now a grandfather. Thank God the mom is healthy, the baby is healthy, and we celebrate together with Bruce and his family, and we hope and pray that young Mason grows up to be a beacon of light for his family, for his community, for his parents and grandparents, and of course, for the Almighty in heaven. It is indeed a very special Parsha podcast episode, because this week is Parshas Eikev of the year 5784, and our street that we are on began Parshas Re'eh, which is next week, 5780. So that means that this week, it's the culmination of a 4-year streak of not missing a single week of producing a brand new episode on the Parsha podcast. Even though it's year 8 of the Parsha podcast, there were some times, I'm not so proud of this, but there have been some times in the past where we missed an episode here or there. One week we would miss, always with good justified excuses, if I recall correctly. But 4 years ago, we began a streak that is still ongoing with the help of the Almighty. And we're hoping and praying for the continuation of this streak for more years, hopefully, maybe even 40 more years. Of course, we're not guaranteed to survive the rest of the day or the week for sure. Every day, every moment, every breath is a gift from the Almighty. And certainly every Parsha podcast is a gift from the Almighty. But it's a nice, momentous occasion, a milestone, 4 years, Cal Ripken-esque, John Sterling-esque. Not every episode has been something to remember and to re-listen to and to write home about. I think this one will be, of course, with the help of the Almighty, but it's something to be said of the fact that we did 4 years, and we hope and pray that we can continue doing this with the help of the Almighty in good health and in great spirits to study the Parsha podcast. On the Parsha podcast, my name is Rabbi Yaakov Wolbe. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Thanks for joining me on this wonderful journey and voyage. And we hope we can do this many, many more years and many, many more weeks and many more Parsha podcasts, please God, in the future. It's Parshas Eikev. And it begins with such wonderful verses. The first 5 verses describe what will happen to us if we hearken, if we listen to the wonderful laws and statutes of the Almighty. V'haya, and it will be, if we hearken to the commandments, to the laws, and we guard them, and we perform them, well then God, He will preserve the covenant and the kindness that He promised to our forefathers. If we hearken to the Almighty, follow His laws, the verse tells us, He will do the same. He will respond in kind. He will preserve and maintain His covenant that He struck with our forefathers. And then we read these wonderful blessings that we will garner as a result. He will love us. He will bless us. He will increase us and bless our children and bless our produce and our grain and our wine and our oil and our animals, our livestock and sheep. Things will be great. We'll have prosperity. We'll have blessing. We'll have security. We'll have fertility. We'll have continuity. It will be wonderful. And the verse continues, all illness will be removed from us, and all devastation, all disease will be removed from us, and instead it will be placed upon our enemies. And we'll destroy all of our enemies, and we'll overcome and pummel and humble all those that stand before us. Our parsha begins on a very happy note. It's a divine promise. If we listen to the Almighty and we follow His laws and we hearken to His statutes and we obey His mitzvos, we're going to have all these wonderful, terrific, desirable blessings. And what's required? What are the terms? What do we need to do to become worthy of these blessings? The verse says we have to listen to the mitzvos. Now, There's an incredible comment here in Rashi. And I think every year that we study this Parsha, we read this Rashi. Rashi notes, with a very sharp reading as he always does, that the verse does not say simply, do the mitzvos, you'll get these blessings. Instead, the verse says, V'haya Eikev tishmu, it will be on the heels of you listening and hearkening to these mitzvos that you'll receive these blessings. And Rashi, citing from the Midrash, Rashi tells us that this is not simply referring to doing mitzvos. The verse says it will be on the heels of doing the mitzvos. Says Rashi, it's not the generic mitzvos. It's not even the big mitzvos that will trigger this divine response, but specifically the mitzvos that a person tends to trample upon with their heels, the mitzvos that people view as insignificant. There's some mitzvos, Rashi is informing us, they're not as important as the big mitzvos, the major accomplishments, the major devotion and self-sacrifice. No, the simple mitzvos, the easy mitzvos, the ones that we don't view as being as important. We tend to discount them, disregard them, trample upon them with our heels. Says Rashi, says the verse, Rashi interprets the verse, if we fastidiously observe those mitzvos, the underappreciated mitzvos, then we will become deserving of all these blessings. That is the first comment in Rashi in our Parsha. And of course, the question is glaring. It's obvious. We know that the Almighty typically works with a system of tit for tat. Reward is commensurate to what we did to achieve that reward. If someone does a small mitzvah, well, the reward should be a small reward. Small deeds yield small rewards. But here, the way Rashi interprets this verse, it seems like the small mitzvah, those underappreciated mitzvahs that people tend to trample upon with their heels, they yield outsized rewards. And the question that all the commentators raise, and we've spoken about this many times on previous Parsha podcasts of Parsha's Eikev, they ask the question, why is there a discrepancy? Why are we getting such wonderful rewards specifically for doing the small mitzvahs? Maybe if we did the major mitzvahs, then the Almighty will give us the reward. That I get. But here we're told, you do the minor mitzvahs, the small mitzvahs, the seemingly insignificant mitzvahs, the mitzvahs that are so underappreciated that people tend to just disregard and trample over them. You do those mitzvahs, then you will become worthy of all this incredible reward. And if you listen to some of the other episodes we've done on this Parsha, you know that we've spoken about this in the past. And we spoke about humility. You do a big mitzvah. You feel good about yourself. Look at me. I'm special. I'm righteous. I'm elevated. I'm a good person. I worked so hard to serve the Almighty in this world. You get an inflated sense of self-worth. And you begin to feel superior to other people. A big mitzvah, a major mitzvah, a mitzvah that everyone realizes is important, that can potentially engender haughtiness. You feel like you're a better person now. You are aloof, towering over your peers. You can end up losing more than what you gained by doing the mitzvah. When someone does a small mitzvah, it's not so important. They give a little charity, they do a little Torah study, they do a little mitzvah, a little prayer, a little kindness, whatever it is. It's no big deal. Okay, but you don't feel better about yourself. You don't walk around with this inflated sense of importance that look who I am. I'm so important. I'm so special. Those minor mitzvos, it's not going to have that haughtiness. That's one idea that we've spoken about in the past. Alternatively, we've also addressed in the past that maybe doing small mitzvahs, doing small deeds, making small incremental slow changes, that is a way, it's a tactic, if you will, of progressing in your spiritual agenda without raising the ire and the backlash of the Yetzer Hara. growth, ascending the ladder of spiritual greatness can be described as encroaching upon the territory of the evil inclination. And if you push too hard, you're going to arouse a very harsh backlash from the Yetzer Hara. And instead, we speculated in the past, my grandfather, blessed memory, spoke about this at length. Instead, you try to ascend the ladder, but one rung at a time, and without fanfare, without trying to call attention to yourself, furtively ascending the mountain, ascending the ladder of greatness. My grandfather, blessed memory, used to tell of the story after the 6-Day War, when the Israeli army was in Egyptian territory, he was flown in to go give lectures and discourses to the Israeli soldiers. In that war, they experienced such incredible miracles. Everyone thought that the nation was doomed, that this Zionist experiment was over after 19 years. These better funded, better armed enemies were going to simultaneously attack Israel from all sides and going to overwhelm the Jews, shove them into the sea. That was the anticipation before the war. And it was a stunning victory. 6 days, they just triple or quadruple even, the territory of this small state, and such stunning victories. So a lot of people were so moved by the experience that they determined that this is miraculous. And they concluded that there must be a God. And there was receptiveness to the ideas of faith. My grandfather, blessed memory, was flown in to go speak to the troops in Egypt. And he was flown in on an army plane. And when they got to Egyptian territory, the plane started flying very, very low, just a few meters above the ground. And my grandfather asked the pilot, is there something wrong? Is there a malfunction in the plane? And the pilot says, no, we're in Egyptian territory now. And we don't want to be picked up by the radar of the enemy. And we don't want to get shot down. So we're flying so low that the enemy radar cannot detect the Israeli jet. So my grandfather, blessed memory, said this is an incredible lesson. He wrote this in one of his books. When we're trying to grow in our spiritual life, we're encroaching upon our enemy's territory. And if you want to do that properly without getting shot down, you got to fly under the radar. You can't push too hard. And therefore, those small things, those small steps, those small incremental steps that don't really get people's attention, the things that people maybe disregard, that's not how you transform yourself. That's how you change the world. The things that people trample upon, that is the real path to growth. Things that won't get you any attention, that slow incremental improvement across all fronts, that is how you actually progress. And that's what's going to engender all these blessings, because that's what's going to lead to changing you as a person and making you worthy of all those blessings. Now, as we're going to discuss, this is something that I know it's true, I kind of struggle with it. Because I like the idea of big, bold, audacious moves, these big changes, this gobbling up more than you could chew and keeping on chewing until you can swallow it. This idea of small, steady growth, making a big impact, even though I know it's correct, and I understand that's what our sages are telling us. Nevertheless, I'm kind of the persuasion that I like the big, aggressive, and bold moves. But this is a common Rashi tells us that the impact of the small steps, it's very significant, and that is what's going to lead to all these blessings. And when I read throughout the Parsha, I found this theme in a few other places. And it's kind of often that you see that the first comment in Rashi, it's actually a theme that's strung throughout the Parsha. We see this a lot throughout the Torah. So I want to suggest some other angles to this idea that's featured in the first Rashi of the Parsha That the small mitzvahs, those mitzvahs that you trample upon, that you tread upon with your heels, that's what makes a big impact in a way that you would not have otherwise imagined. If you continue reading in chapter 7, the very beginning of the Parsha, it describes the conquest of the land. The verse tells us, when you shall say in your heart, oh, these nations, these Canaanite nations, these 7 Canaanite nations and these 31 Canaanite teams, they're so big and they're so vast and so powerful. How can I possibly overwhelm them? How can I conquer their lands? The verse tells us, don't be scared of them. Remember what they might did to Pharaoh, to the Egyptians, all the miracles, all the wondrous deeds that the Almighty performed, the signs and the wonders and the strong hand, the outstretched arm. Remember the Exodus. The deck was stacked against us in that conflict. Egypt was the world's superpower, and who were we? Just a band of slaves. But look what God did to them. And what God did to the Egyptians, that is what he will do to these nations. Furthermore, the verse tells us, God's going to send a plague to attack those Canaanites. Don't be scared of them. Do not dread them. God's in your midst. You have that ace up your sleeve. This great and awesome and all-powerful and omnipotent God. He's on your side. Don't worry about these other nations. And the verse says something very interesting. Verse 22. God's going to help you in this war. And he's going to dispossess these people, these Canaanites. But he's going to do it little by little, very slowly. It's not going to be instantaneous. It's not going to happen all at once. You're not going to get rid of them in one shot, in one fell swoop. Because if you do, then the wild animals will fill the vacant land and they will overwhelm you. This verse 22, is telling us that the conquest of Canaan, yes, it's going to be aided by the Almighty. The Almighty who helped us defeat Egypt, he's going to help us defeat these Canaanites. But it's not going to be instantaneous. Instead, it's going to be slow and gradual. And the verse continues, God will deliver them to us, and we'll throw them into panic until they're wiped out, and their kings will be delivered to your hand. Destroy them. No one's going to stand up to you. And make sure you take their idols, their pagan deities, destroy them. If they're made of gold and silver, don't desire it. Don't get caught up into their idolatry because you could be ensnared by it. Don't take it to your house. You should destroy it. You should reject it. You should repudiate it in every possible way. But here in verse 22 of chapter 7, there's a counterintuitive point. Yes, you're going to have the Almighty on your side, and you're going to defeat them thanks to his help in the way he helped you defeat the Egyptians. But it's not going to be overwhelming. It's not going to be instantaneous. No, if the Almighty were to dislodge all the Canaanites all at once, there's going to be some negative consequences. Some negative and unanticipated consequences. The Almighty is aware of that. He doesn't want those wild beasts to fill the land, and therefore it's going to happen slowly and gradually, me'at, little by little. As they say, nature abhors a vacuum. Now the land is possessed by the Canaanites. If you remove them instantaneously, that vacuum will be filled by those wild beasts, and therefore it's not going to happen instantaneously. It's going to happen slowly but surely, slowly and gradually, incrementally, step by step. Perhaps we can suggest that there is a parallel between this description of the conquest of the land and our pursuit, and anyone's pursuit really, of advancement in their spiritual agenda. To grow as a person, to grow as a soul, to advance in your spiritual pursuits, that's like a war of conquest. And just as the conquest of Canaan has been done slowly and gradually, when you want to upgrade yourself, when you want to transform yourself, that also must be done slowly and gradually. Why not a blitzkrieg? Do it all in one day. You remember what happened when they invaded Iraq for the second time? It was shock and awe. That was the plan. But it didn't work out. And I think there's an insight here into why something like that doesn't work out. The dispossessing of the Canaanites can be done instantaneously. But that's only half of the conquest. To eradicate the enemy fast is doable. But eliminating the enemy is only one part of the equation. You have to populate the vacated territory with elements that you are desirous of. So yes, you can clear out the Canaanites right away, but unless it's done gradually, the land will be filled with the wild beasts of the field, and that will be worse. What the verse is telling us is that conquest, it's not just about removing the enemy, it's about supplanting the enemy, replacing them with something that is desirous. And if you clear out the enemy very quickly, only to have it supplanted by some other noxious and menacing force, well, maybe you'll end up worse off. I want to perhaps suggest that this maybe can serve as a useful framing for the idea in that first Rashi. He's talking about mitzvos, and he's telling us that there's major mitzvos, and there's minor mitzvos that people tend to disregard. They don't view it as important. They trample upon it with their heels. If we liken our pursuit of spiritual greatness, our war, so to speak, against the Yetzer Hara, to this description of how the conquest of Canaan must be done, we can perhaps suggest that the model of the conquest of Canaan should be followed. We want to clear out the enemy. We want to remove the Yetzer Hara, so to speak, from the holy land, from the sacred territory, from our hearts and soul. We have the Yetzer Hara squatting within us. We need to eliminate it. How are you going to do that? So you want to use a shock and awe system. It will seem to yield phenomenal results. And you could give bombastic speeches under a mission accomplished banner. But the fighting will continue. And that celebration will prove to be premature. And eventually you'll have to flee that territory because you weren't smart and you weren't shrewd and you weren't calculating in how you went about conquering it. Perhaps this is another angle to this idea, to the importance, to the centrality of small steps, of small mitzvos, of mitzvos that you trample upon, mitzvos that you disregard. It's very important. It's critical in our ladder of ascent to greatness. Now, the truth is I'm lingering on this point. I know we spoke about this in the past. I know it's true, but I kind of sympathize with the other side. I like the shock and awe. I like the 30-day shred. I like that Nazir yeshiva that we talked about in the past. And I tend to think that most people are a bit overcautious. And they're so worried about taking a big step that only take micro steps and end up not ever really advancing and not becoming great in a way that they could have if they were a bit more bold. But I'm still acknowledging this is what Rashi tells us, and our sages are always warning us against taking steps that are too big. My grandfather, blessed memory, used to always say that a festival, we have lots of festivals in our calendar. We've got Sukkot and Pesach and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur and Purim and so on. The spiritual essence of a festival, it's a day, it's an opportunity for geometric, nonlinear, exponential growth and transformation. So if you're looking for a safe and effective model for this sort of transformation, that's what a festival is. It's a time of rapid change, rapid conquest of enemy territory in a way that endures, in a way that proves to be lasting. And I want to just tell you that everything I've ever heard on the subject, it was always on the other side of the debate. And I'm convinced that it's correct, but I sympathize with the other side very strongly. And I'm always looking for systems, for conventions of rapid transformation, of those quantum leaps up the ladder, those big steps, not just the minor steps, small, incremental, we'll get there eventually. The Talmud tells us 3 stories of people who were not righteous, who were unremarkable in their spiritual standing, who became elevated, who catapulted themselves to the highest level, to the highest acme in one moment, with one action, with one deed. And after all of these 3 episodes, the verse tells us that there was a prophetic voice that announced, this and this person is welcomed to Olam Haba. They're part of this very exclusive group of people that merit Olam Haba. And in each 3 instances of this story, the Talmud tells that Rabbi Judah the Prince, when he heard that prophetic voice, he wept. And he said some people spend their whole life trying to be included in this exclusive group of people, this exclusive cohort of those people who are deserving of Olam Haba, and some acquire it in one moment, in 1 hour. And I spent some time in my book on this subject, and I called it the spiritual shortcut. Not this slow and gradual process, do the small mitzvahs that people disregard, the ones that people trample upon, and do it slowly and gradually. Over the course of 50, 60, 70, 90 years, you'll reach this very high level. A shortcut. 1 moment, 1 day, 1 hour. Do something outrageous and achieve the end of that otherwise long and grinding journey. But of course, the only downside is, and you're familiar with this if you read my book, which I'm sure all of you did, all those 3 people that had that majestic transformation, they all died as a result. And in my book, I wrote about how there's actually a loophole. In the loophole, there's a way maybe to achieve that punctuated equilibrium change, that quantum change, without dying. Rapid shock and awe conquest without any negative consequences. And that's what speaks to me. I'm always wrestling with this, and the search continues for systems, for modalities in which that sort of growth can work. But in our Parsha, we see the first Rashi and this description of how the conquest of Canaan, the optimal way to conquer it, it's done slow, it's done gradually. Not because you can't accomplish it all at once, but that will not endure. Something will fill that vacuum. The wild beasts will come in, and you'll end up worse off than had you done it slowly and gradually. I want to revisit this idea again in the second segment of this very special Parsha podcast episode. In chapter 9 of our book, the Parsha recounts one of the most memorable and tragic and traumatic events in the Torah. Moshe is reminding the nation about what happened at Sinai and their treacherous and treasonous behavior. Beginning in chapter 9, verse 8, he tells them at Chorev, which is a nickname for Sinai, you provoked God, and God wanted to destroy you. What happened at Sinai? So Moshe tells them. Verse 9, I ascended the mountain. I wanted to get the tablets of stone, luchos avonim, luchos habris, the tablets of the covenant. And I was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and I ate no bread and I drank no water. And God gave me these 2 stone tablets. that were written with the finger of God. What did it say in it? The 10 Commandments. And at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, this is verse 11, God gave me these 2 stone tablets, luchos habris, the tablets of the covenant. And then God says, go down, because your nation became corrupted. They have deviated from the path that I instructed them. They made the golden calf. As we know, Moshe's in heaven, the nation's anticipating him. He delays in coming down, or at least that's how they interpreted it. And they get Aaron to make the golden calf, and they begin to celebrate. And Moshe comes down with the tablets. And this is described, of course, in chapter 32 of Exodus, and it's revisited over here. Moshe was reminding the people it's been 40 years. But don't forget this. It's very important for you to remember what happened. And Moshe tells us what happened in heaven. God tells him, I want to destroy this nation. They're a stiff-necked people. Let me destroy them. Let me erase their name from under the heaven, and I'll make you a great nation. And Moshe prayed on our behalf and forestalled that option. I descended from the mountain, and the mountain's still aflame and fire. I'm still carrying those 2 tablets of the covenant, and I see a golden calf. And I take these two tablets, and I throw them from upon my hands, and I break them in front of your eyes. And I prayed for 40 days and 40 nights. Again, bread I did not eat. Water I did not drink. Moshe is telling us the events of the sign of revelation. Of course, you have the actual sign of revelation. Then Moshe goes up to heaven, and the nation's left without Moshe. And while he's in heaven, getting the tablets, getting the Torah, the nation is down below. They're waiting for him. And this terrible event happens. They do the golden calf. Moshe comes down with the tablets and shatters the tablets before their eyes. Now, this deed of Moshe, when he shattered the tablets, this is a very traumatic event. Moshe has the tablets of testimony, stone tablets etched by the finger of God. And he breaks them, and he shatters it. And yes, we read in our Parsha, he gets a second set of tablets. And we know that in the Ark of the Covenant, both sets of tablets were incorporated. But this deed, it's one of the most striking episodes in the whole Torah. Moshe takes those tablets and shatters them. Now, at the end of the Torah, at the very end of our book, the very last thing the Torah addresses is the death, the burial, and the eulogy of Moshe. And the Torah lauds Moshe, of course. Greatest prophet, humblest man. And the very last verse of the Torah, it describes the great might and awesome power that Moshe displayed le'enei kol Yisrael, in front of the eyes of all of Israel. What did Moshe do in front of the eyes of all of Israel? That's in our Parsha, chapter 9, verse 19. He broke the tablets in front of the eyes. Le'enechem, I broke the tablets. I shattered the tablets in front of your eyes. What is the crowning achievement of Moshe? The final crescendo of the Torah in general, but of the Torah's eulogy of Moshe? It's this event that he shattered the tablets in front of the eyes of the whole nation. That's the peak. That is the apotheosis of Moshe's greatness. And we have a problem with this. Why is this an appropriate thing to do? And why is this the greatest thing that Moshe ever did? Like, what's the justification of doing it? God gives you stone tablets, tablets of the covenant, as the verse calls it. And you break it. In our worldview, anything that you have from God it's a gift from God. You shouldn't destroy or disregard anything that God gives you. Jacob endangers his life to go save those judges on the other side of the river, as we recall from the book of Genesis. Why? Because it's from God. God gave this to me. There must be a use that I need with these judges. And the tablets, they are the greatest physical gift that God ever gave humanity. This is the pinnacle of Sinai, the goal of Sinai. Moshe says it, verse 9. I went up to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights and didn't eat bread, didn't drink any water. Why? To take the stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. And that's the goal. That's what he's there to do. And he gets it. And he shatters it. So, of course, I have to preface, this is a very lofty and deep subject. And really, as we shall see, this whole subject of the tablets and the shattering of the tablets, it's very mysterious, very esoteric, very arcane. But one of the ideas behind Moshe's decision to shatter the tablets is that he did that to save the nation. You cannot have a nation that simultaneously is dancing around the golden calf and also has tablets etched by the finger of God, tablets of covenant. Those two are just not compatible. It's incongruent or incongruent. They don't jibe. And why don't they jibe? Now, again, there's all sorts of angles to this. Anything that deals with the tablets is in the domain of Sisrei Torah, the secrets of Torah. The tablets are secrets. And the Talmud tells us that Moshe's decision to destroy the tablets was one of the 3 unilateral decisions that he made. He made it on his own, and God acceded to his decision. Just to get a sense of what secrets we're dealing with over here, the shattering of the tablets. There is a motif in the Kabbalistic literature called the shattering of the vessels. Shviras HaKelim. Now, I don't know anything about these things. I'm ignorant in all these matters. But from what I understand, the concept of the shattering of the vessels, it has something to do with the fact that God is a giver and everything else is a taker. Literally everything else besides for God is a creation of God and thus is a vessel to receive, so to speak, God's light. It's a vessel that absorbs the light, the influence of God. And I'm not claiming to understand what this actually means. But the concept, as I understand it, is that God created vessels, but they weren't able to absorb the light and they shattered. And God created worlds upon universes that were all created and were destroyed because they were shattered. And on that canvas, our existence, our world, our universe was created and on some dimension can absorb that light. So my brilliant brother-in-law, he observed that if you look at those final words of the eulogy of Moshe, the final words of the Torah, chapter 34, verse 12, when it describes the powerful hand and the outstretched arm and the great wonders that Moshe did before the eyes of all of Israel, the first letter of the final 4 words of the Torah describe what Moshe did before the eyes of all of Israel, which Rashi tells us that's a reference to the destruction of the tablets. Those 4 words, Moshe le'enei kol Yisrael, the first letter of those final 4 words spell out the word kalim, which means vessels. And Moshe is shattering the tablets, and that's in some way akin to the shattering of the vessels upon which the world was created. And by the way, what happens if you continue reading after the end of Devarim? after the end of Deuteronomy, after the end of Torah, what's the next words that you read in the Torah? You start from the beginning. You read about Genesis. You read about the beginning, the creation. And thus the breaking of the tablets is almost the prelude, the preamble, the precursor to Genesis. So on some level, Moshe's shattering the tablets, very lofty, very esoteric, very arcane, is some sort of transcendental deed. That's the highlight of Moshe's life. And that's the ground upon which we can build, or can be built, the world that ensues. So again, very lofty stuff. But what we know for sure is that the tablets of testimony, the tablets of the covenant, that does not coexist with the golden calf. And perhaps we can give maybe an image to this. Back in the book of Leviticus, we learned how a Kohen who is crippled, who is disfigured, God forbid, who's blemished, he's disqualified from doing work in the temple. And today, with our modern sensibilities, we have a hard time, well, what's wrong? Or what about the Americans with Disabilities Act? But the verse tells us, if someone is blemished, if they're misshapen in any which way, they're disqualified from doing work in the temple. And one of the descriptions of someone who is disqualified is a sarua. Now, what is a sarua? Chapter 21, verse 18 of Leviticus tells us, if one of their limbs is larger than another one of their limbs, one leg is longer than the other leg, one eye is bigger than the other eye, that is a blemish. If someone has big eyes, that's fine. If someone has small eyes, that's also fine. But one big and one small, that's a problem. To have a big arm, that's okay. To have big arms, that's fine. To have small arms, that's also fine. But to have one big and one small, that's a problem. If there's a lack of consistency and proportionality, if there's a mismatch between the limbs, that's a blemish, and that is disqualified. Is it good to have big ears or little ears? I was told when I was a kid, we'll always have somewhat larger ears. So I was told that it's a sign of intelligence. I really believed it. I don't know if it withstands the rigors of scientific scrutiny. But let's assume it's better to have big ears. Let's imagine. One big ear and one smaller, that's a blemish. Is it better to be muscular or not muscular? We would say, well, it's better to be muscular. Muscle, it's good, it's healthy. But it's not okay to have one arm, the right arm is really muscular, and the left's thin and feeble. If someone's misshapen, if someone's not proportional, that in the eyes of the Torah is a blemish. I remember when I was a kid, my parents had this comic book. It was like sports comics, cartoons. And there was one I looked for. I could not find this online. Couldn't find it. Maybe it's still in my parents' house somewhere. So every page was like a joke, but a cartoon. And one of the cartoons that I recall was this really short guy holding a basketball in his right hand. And he's talking to these really tall other guys. And there's a basketball hoop in the background. And one of those two people he's talking to, they're like, wait a minute, you want to bet? You want to have a wager that you're going to dunk and you're going to do it with your left hand? You got a deal. And the part that's funny is that you see that he has a comically, absurdly long left arm that's hidden from the view of the people he's talking to. I couldn't find this cartoon, but it reminded me of it. His right arm is normally sized, but his left arm's like leaning it's like he's standing, but it's like kind of folded on the floor. You may want long arms, that's okay, but you don't want one arm that's long and one arm that's short. You want to remain proportional, otherwise it is a blemish in the eyes of the Torah. Even if we assume the big ears are a sign of intelligence, one big ear and one small one is a blemish. the Jewish nation, we're like a single entity. It's like a standalone entity, like a person. You have a person. A person has two arms, but it's only one person. A person you have arms and legs and a head and a brain and a heart and internal organs and ankles, but you're one human. The nation's like that as well. There's 12 tribes, but it's one entity. There's 600,000 souls, but it's one entity. It's all sorts of different people that make up this nation, but it's one entity. Moshe, perhaps, is shattering the tablets in order to maintain proportionality within the nation. The nation can exist, notwithstanding the fact that they made a golden calf. But they cannot continue to exist if they have both a golden calf and tablets that they got from God. If it's that lopsided, they have such righteousness on one hand and such wickedness on the other hand, that's a problem. Golden calf and tablets. That's a blemish. And that is disqualifying. So what does Moshe do? He takes the tablets and he shatters them. And thereby ensures that the nation can endure. Yes, they're flawed, and yes, we have to address the problem. But there's proportionality now amongst the people. They're not lopsided anymore. And this idea, perhaps we can offer it as yet another way to understand that first Rashi. If someone does something very big, they're making a big leap in one area of their life. If it's not accompanied with growth on all other vectors, if it's isolated, if it's lopsided, it's actually a blemish. Growth has to be on all fronts. It has to be proportional. Moshe breaks the tablets. He restores symmetry to the nation. They're not misshapen, they're not asymmetric. They don't have one absurdly large right arm and one small one. They're not blemished. It's better to have two weak and small and spindly little arms than to have one incredible element that doesn't match the other side. This is true for the nation, and it's true for the individual. One outstanding quality, one big mitzvah, one big quantum leap, surrounded by other things that are not quite on that same level, that's a blemish. And maybe that's the idea behind this, the small steps. Small steps on so many different fronts, that's doable. One big leap on one area, it may turn someone into a spiritual cripple. Again, this is an idea that I struggle with. I'm always enchanted by extraordinary ability, by skill in one area that maybe is not on par with other areas. You think about drafting. I always assume, perhaps a bit charitably, that if I was in some other job, I could probably do well. I always think about this is something I think about a lot. This whole idea of drafting, these sports teams, they draft players and they don't seem, they can't do it right. It's kind of mind-bending to me that after all these years of analytics, advancements and sabermetrics and trial and error, you still see so many examples of great transcendental players that are not drafted on the top of the draft. And you have the people who are at the top of the draft who are busts. And there's always these questions, do you look for someone who's an all-around great player? Or do you try to find someone with exceptional abilities in very narrow fields? You're looking for generalists or specialists. And we see again and again in the eyes of the Torah that when someone is disproportionate, it's dangerous. Esav, Jacob's twin brother, he was greater than Jacob when it comes to the mitzvah of honoring your father and mother. He was outstanding in that one area, but in all other areas he was severely lacking. And Jacob's called Tam, which means he's complete. He's well-rounded. And I think this relates to the subject featured in the first comment of Rashi. To have tablets by God, it sounds incredible. What a gift. What an asset to have. We would all want it, right? It'd be good for us, no matter where we are or what we are. Moshe says otherwise. No, it's not good for you if you also have a golden calf. It's better to not have it than to have that together with a golden calf, because then you're misshapen and then you are doomed. The third and final segment of this very special edition of the Parsha podcast also relates to the narrative of the tablets. And if you read through from chapter 9, verse 9 through 9:17, you read through it very carefully, you'll find some interesting observations in how the tablets are described. Moshe, in verse 9, he tells the nation, I ascended the mountain, lakachas, to take, luchos ha'avanim, the stone tablets, luchos habris, the tablets of the covenant. So there's a redundancy. What's Moshe going up to get? You read the verse. It says he's going to get luchos avanim, which means stone tablets. And then it says luchos habris, tablets of the covenant. Why is there a redundancy? Well, why is it stone tablets? And then it says tablets of the covenant. If you look at the next two verses, it seems like it could be consolidated into one. In verse 10, it says, God gave me the 2 tablets of stone. By the way, here it's not described as tablets of the bris, luchos habris. It's described just as tablets of stone that were etched by the finger of God. And upon them, it says all the words that he spoke, the 10 commandments. And then verse 11, it says, it was at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, God gave me these 2 stone tablets. And now they're called not just stone tablets, they're called tablets of covenant. So again, these 2 verses, it describes the giving of the tablets, and it does it twice. It seems like it's a bit redundant. And then the verse says that God told Moshe to descend, nations stiff-necked, destroy them. And in verse 15, Moshe is carrying the tablets, and it describes the tablets as luchos habris, the tablets of the covenant. And then Moshe says, I saw the golden calf. I see that you're sinning. You've deviated from the path that God commanded you. And then verse 17, I grabbed the 2 tablets. Doesn't mention that they're stone tablets. Doesn't mention that they are tablets of the covenant. And I threw them on the ground and I shattered them in front of your eyes. So if you're a sharp, eagle-eyed reader, you will notice that it's switching from tablets of stone to tablets of testimony. Sometimes it's called none, sometimes it's called both, sometimes it's called one, not the other. It's very interesting. Of course, there's nothing which is random in the Torah. It's not a coincidence. It's not an oversight. Why is it ping-ponging from being described as tablets of testimony to being tablets of stone to being just ordinary tablets? What's going on over here? So the commentaries address it, and they say that there's a very big difference between the tablets before they encountered the sin of the golden calf and afterwards. The Midrash tells us that when Moshe saw the golden calf, the letters that had been etched upon the stone tablets, they fluttered away. They flew to heaven. They ascended to heaven. They left the stone tablets and elevated themselves back to where they came from. And in fact, the commentaries note that if you read the word from verse 17, where Moshe says, I threw them, it's missing a letter Yud, v'ashlichem, which means I threw them. It doesn't have the letter Yud. And the commentaries tell us, the Baal Turim says, the Yud, which is 10, it left, it departed, because the 10 commandments had departed from these stone tablets. So the tablets are not just this monolithic stone. Sometimes they're imbued with the covenant. Sometimes they have the 10 commandments on it. And sometimes they don't. And so sometimes they're called just stone tablets. Sometimes they're called tablets of testimony, tablets of the covenant. And when they were bereft of the covenant, when the covenant escaped and fluttered to heaven, Moshe says, what do I have? I have these stone tablets. He chucked them on the ground. There's another idea to explain what's happening over here. Listen to this. Listen to this. If you're still listening here at the end of the podcast, the Chassam Sofer says that the word for covenant, bris, in Hebrew, it's spelled Beis, Resh, Yud, Saf. Bris, or Brit. The gematria of that, what's the gematria? Beis is 2, Resh is 200, Yud is 10, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is a Taf, that's 400. The total of all that is 612. Ain't that an interesting number? 612. Says the Chassam Sofer, 612 is one fewer than the amount of mitzvahs that we have. That's 613. The state of being in a covenant with God is when you only have 612 mitzvahs to do. Because the last mitzvah, that's repentance. And that mitzvah only gets triggered once you sin. What an interesting idea here. If someone never sins, if they actually never sin, well, what's there to repent for? All they have is 612 mitzvahs that they can perform. And that state is a state of a covenant. That means that they're so bound up with God, there's no violation of that relationship. There's no repudiation of that relationship. That's a covenant. And therefore, before the sin of the golden calf, it's called the tablets of the covenant. Once there's a sin, the covenant flees. The covenant leaves. The covenant departs. There's no longer a world of 612. Now it's 613. You got to repent. And that's why these tablets, the status and the name of the tablets changed. When the nation got it, the initial giving of the tablets, the nation was at this pristine level, a covenant with God. They were bound up with God. They were in this pact with the Almighty. The golden calf, that's a betrayal of God. It's a betrayal of the covenant. It's a betrayal of 612. Now there's 613, and that status gets removed from the tablets. Perhaps we can extend this a bit further. We had asked a few questions just a little bit earlier. In verse 9, Moshe describes his ascent to the mountain. I went up the mountain to take luchos ha'avanim, the tablets of stone, luchos habris. He's going to get two themes here. Stone tablets and tablets of the covenant. And then you read the timeline, it's two quite inexplicable verses, verse 10 and 11. Verse 10 says, God gave me the stone tablets. That was verse 10. Verse 11, it was at the end of 40 days God gave me the tablets of the covenant. Now that we're told that there's a different state, there's a difference between tablets of stone and tablets of the covenant, Moshe ascends, what does he want to get? He wants to get both. That's why in verse 9 it says, I want to get both the tablets of stone and the tablets of the covenant. Luchos ha'avanim, luchos habris. He went to get both. When he arrived, verse 10, he got the stone tablets. And what was he doing there for 40 days? 40 days, there was this process of infusing into those stone tablets whatever made them into tablets of the covenant, into luchos habris. There's two themes here. There's two entities in these tablets. At the initial inception of the 40 days, they're simply stone tablets. At the end of the 40 days, they've been upgraded to tablets of the covenant. And what was lost with the sin of the golden calf? Whatever is the difference, whatever it means, the tablets of the covenant, that was removed, and all that was left is just the stone tablets. Similarly, our sages tell us that when the temple was destroyed, it was God throwing his wrath upon wood and stone. Shafach chamaso, he threw his wrath on wood and stone. The temple's wood and stone. The temple's domicile for God in this world. God, the divine presence, had left the temple. All that was left is wood and stone, just physical entities, a building, an edifice with vessels, lacking the divine presence. In our eyes, you look at the temple, it would appear to be the same thing. It's a building, it's got lots of different parts of the building, lots of wood, lots of stone, lots of vessels. And in our eyes, we couldn't discern between a temple, that's a domicile for God, and just a building of wood and stone. That's what happened. God removed his presence. He removed what made a temple, the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, made it the temple, and all that was left was wood and stone. Similarly, we have the stone tablets or the tablets of the covenant. On the surface, they may appear to us to be identical, but one is stone tablets and one is tablets of the covenant. And when Moshe sees the golden calf, whatever made these tablets covenant tablets, it fled. It fluttered to heaven. And all that was left were the stone tablets. And that he shattered. I had a conversation with my brothers-in-law about what's going to be with the first set of tablets. As we know, the Parsha tells us there was a second set of tablets. After God forgave the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf, Moshe went up for a third time to get the second set of tablets. And both sets of tablets were placed in the ark for safekeeping. And both sets of tablets are still extant today. And in the times of Messiah, that will be found. And of course, the second set of tablets will still be intact. But what about the first set of tablets? What's going to be in the future when Messiah comes? What's going to be with that first set of tablets? Will they mend? Will they fuse back together? Now what's interesting, deep and deeper, profound and profounder, the sages tell us that the first set of tablets, had we maintained them, had they not been shattered, we would never have forgotten Torah. The state of the Jewish people in that counterfactual world where we maintain the first set of tablets, it would be such that the Torah would always be so bound up within us, we would never forget it. And the commentaries go yet further. And they differentiate between, and this is again, big time inside baseball here, between the primordial world plan God had initially wanted to create the world in a very different system than the one that he ultimately created the world with. It was in a system of judgment versus a system of benevolence. The first tablets were shattered because they related to a different world, to a world that preceded ours, a world of judgment. But the second set of tablets, that is more related to a world of benevolence, a world of mercy. And just as in the future times, we're going to restore that previously destroyed world, our sages tell us, we're going to restore the previous set of tablets that match, that are congruent with that previous world. Those tablets will once again be activated for our nation. The Kabbalists tell us that before Aaron made the sin of the golden calf, he tells the nation, there's a festival for God tomorrow. And our sages tell us that that day is the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, and in the future, it will actually be a festival, as Aaron said. Tomorrow in the future, it will indeed be a festival, a real festival, a festival for God. Because those first set of tablets will be restored. And the Kabbalists add that repentance mirrors the process of restoration of the first tablets. What is a sin? A sin is a rebellion against a person's otherwise strong and eternal covenant with God in their heart. If you will, the sin is the fluttering of the letters from upon a person's heart, from upon a person's soul. A sin is shattering the tablets of testimony that we have, the tablets of the covenant that we have with God. But repentance means that can be fixed. That can be mended. Those letters, they fluttered to heaven, but they didn't disappear. They're still there. They're being held in escrow until we are ready. Repentance mends a person's covenant with God. And that's true for an individual, and it's true for the nation as well. When we collectively repent in the future, when we restore ourselves to the state that we were at Sinai before that 17th day of Tammuz, those shards of the tablets will once again reabsorb those letters that fluttered to heaven. Moshe describes the shattering of the tablets. Verse 17, I grabbed these tablets, va'ashlichem, and I cast them away from upon my hands. Missing a letter yud, as we mentioned. Va'ashabrim, and I shattered them, le'einechem, in front of your eyes. The Hasidic masters tell us that yes, it was shattered, but it was shattered in front of our eyes. It was only in front of our eyes that it was shattered. In reality, on some dimension, on some extent, on some realm, they are still intact. And please God, they're going to come back if and when we are deserving. So there's something to look forward to. If we're fortunate to be part of that renaissance, of that mending of the first set of tablets, of that mending of the heart of our people, may it happen speedily in our days. May we have not just the tablets of stone, but also the tablets of the covenant. We hope that we're fortunate to partake in that future world. But we have now, with the help of the Almighty, 4 years of this streak in the books. And please God, we will be able to study many, many more weeks and parshios and cycles of the Torah together in good health and in great spirits. I appreciate all of y'all. I love all of y'all a lot. And thank you for listening. And if you made it to the end, I salute you. I applaud you. Keep it up. Kudos. Bravo. Send me an email, rabbiwool@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day. Have a sensational rest of your week. And an uplifting, invigorating, inspiring, enlightening, enthralling Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we will embark on year 5 of our streak next week. This is the Parsha podcast. My name is Yaakov Wolbe. Send me an email, rabbiwool@gmail.com.